Welcome to the Sweat Elite podcast, or welcome back if you are a regular listener. Matt Fox and Luke Keogh with another episode of Training Talk. Luke, thanks for joining. You listened to the chat with Victor last week. What do you think?
I loved it. I thought it was great. I was bummed to have missed it. Apologies for everyone missing out last week. I was really busy with work and other stuff. I really tried to make it, especially because of a lot of things that Victor was talking about. I really did want to kind of get a feel for, ask him some questions and things like that. So I was bummed to have not been able to do that. So hopefully we get him back on to talk about more. Interesting lad, great runner, and yeah, man. Oh, I mean, there's a lot that I like. The first few things that you guys talked about, I definitely would have loved to have been there to, flesh some things out and pick his brain about. Like, obviously the heat training would be the main thing that I was really interested in, like why he's doing it. Because I did listen to a few of his podcasts where he talked about it, but one of the main ones, God, I should have got the guy's name, but the people that listen to Runners FM will know it. He's like an Italian guy that lives in Sweden. That's helping Victor quite a lot with his heat training. Really, really smart guy. Like a lot of the stuff actually he was talking about was like kind of dense to the point where like, I think I'm a pretty smart guy, but a lot of it I was like, what the hell is he talking about? You know what I mean? Like it was very in the weeds. But no, he made it a very dense and nuanced and intellectual topic, kind of quite palatable, like, let's say. I was able to digest quite a good bit of it. But essentially, it is interesting, especially because for someone like me, right, someone that struggles in the heat, someone that is getting beaten up by the heat nonstop, and I want the opposite, right? I pray for the respite, like for what's been going on the last week or two with the cooler weather. I've been praying for it. And even though, like, I've read about the science, I've listened to those podcasts and everything, I don't know. Like, if I was a coach and I was coaching people in cooler climates, like, I don't know that I would recommend it just because of my personal experiences. Like, I think that would be enough for me to not recommend it.
But do you think your personal experiences are exceptionally challenging because you're in it every single day? And, interspersing it with small bouts of it a couple of times a week, that probably will be, that would be effective for sure. And the risk of obviously overtraining and having the issues that you've had with CK levels, I think that's significantly reduced if you're not out in the heat for every single session, right?
Right. Yeah, for sure. But I guess the one part where I would push back on that is that for me, it's never an accumulation. It's always one session that cooks me.
Really?
And then it was like the session that just happened that cooked me there. I showed up for that session fresh as. Like, if you told me, if that morning I woke up and I like, somehow I got transported to 30-degree weather, and I was like, Luke, you have to rip a half marathon PB this morning. No bother. Would have ripped. Not a bother. Just give me decent weather. Like, without a taper, without anything. Easily would have ripped the PB that morning. I was feeling great that morning. And then just pushed that red line just too far in the heat, and boom, that was it. And I could feel it. And it's happened to me so many times that I can feel it. When I push past that red line, I know exactly when it happened, the rep it happened in, the moment it happened. And that's all it takes. Not just for me, for everyone with the heat. The heat is so finicky. And that doctor, the Italian, Swedish doctor that was on the Runners FM podcast, he talked about that, like how you do have to be so careful because it really is so easy to just cross that red line. And I just don't know if the benefits really outweigh, the cost, the potential cost. Because once you cross that red line, there's no going back. There's no going back. You can't just be like, oh, I push it a bit hard on that one. I'm going to reel it. It's like, that's it. You're done. And you're done for probably a few weeks. You won't feel the same for a few weeks at a minimum, maybe longer if you push too far. And like, I do get that he's doing a lot of it with like, pardon me, with easy running and in controlled settings. And he's like, if you follow Victor's stuff, he's a really smart guy, really like, in the weeds. You can tell he's very calculated, very smart. Like him, I would have no worries about. I can never imagine in a few weeks or months or whatever, touch wood, obviously, that he would like post something and be like, damn, I overdid it with the heat train and something. Like I can't see that happening to him. But he's a rare beast, right? How meticulous that guy is, how, like everything is really controlled. Most people are not like that, is my point, you know? And I think it could be really easy for most people to just cross over that red line. And I just, and I get it. I get the science. Like it makes so much sense. The blood plasma, like you get that good platelet-rich plasma, the good yellow stuff. You get it going. The blood volume, like I get it. Like I've read it all a million times, and I get it. Like it's there. It's proven that it can work. I'm not saying anything like that. I'm just talking about the cost. If and possibly when you cross that line, it's such a horrible feeling. Like that, I don't know. I'd be so cautious of recommending anyone to do it. Um, because it's just like, yeah, if you can get away from the heat, get away from the heat. Like running in the heat is just, oh God, it's the bane of my existence. I love running, but I'm in like the worst, not the worst place. There's definitely worse places like Singapore and stuff like that. But I'm in one of the worst places ever for that.
Yeah.
And when it comes to this time of the year, like I gain and gather momentum with my fitness like no other, because it's constantly cold, and I'm just like, man, if I'm getting so fit in the cold, and then I'm like constantly wavering on that red line in the summer, like why would I even need to bother with? Do you know the point I'm trying to make?
Yeah, of course. It's obviously a
Oh,
completely different ballgame training in. What do you have this morning? 45 degrees Fahrenheit, like 6 degrees, 7 degrees Celsius. Yeah.
unbelievable, glorious, unbelievable.
I think a lot of professional athletes do their heat training, and they only that they'll go inside, they'll go into a setup where they've got a treadmill and the room's obviously heated up. From what I understand, a lot of professional athletes don't do like very hard workouts in that heat in
Yeah.
the heat chambers. They'll do easy running, they'll do maybe a bit of marathon effort stuff. But yeah, I don't think it's super common to be doing. They're very, very hard. They're the most difficult, VO2 workouts in the heat. But I could be wrong with that. Mm.
No, I think you're right. I think you're right. And like I said, like with Victor, like I know from following his stuff and listening to him, I know he's doing it right. And it doesn't look like he has like his core sweatsuit, heat suit, and all those things on when he's doing like LT2 stuff or whatever. It looks like it's more easy running and controlled, um, and then getting the blood plasma up that way. So yeah, I get that for
Mm.
sure. No, that's definitely the way to do it if you can do it, and it's definitely interesting, and it'll be interesting to see, if it works for him, because he's not been doing it too long now, right? Is
I
it
don't think so.
like how long?
Yeah, I think it's
Yeah,
relatively new.
yeah. So it'll be interesting to see, like once he gets a couple of years into it, to see how well he progresses.
Yeah. What do you think of the sleep traffic light system that they've got going? Did you listen to that part? I think if you get 9 hours sleep or more,
Yeah,
maybe it
I
was it
did listen to
10,
that part.
you can train
I was
100%,
like,
and then anything under that, I don't know about that. That's it's interesting to listen to, but
what
I mean,
human being is getting like 9, 10 hours of sleep that like is not a professional athlete? That was a bit mad. Yeah, that was a bit mad, because like, man, if I get 7 hours sleep, like I wake up feeling like I just
100%.
got I just got jabbed in the arm with like EPO and all the steroids under the sun. Like I feel fucking unreal. Um, but if I do, usually I get about 6 hours, maybe seven. Um, and that's like I'm grand, Yeah, when I heard that, so what was it? It was like red was seven or less.
I think it was six or less. We should have it up on the screen here, but I think green was nine or more, and that means you can
Green was
train at
nine or more.
100%. And then anything between
Yeah,
7 and 9, I believe. We could be off with half an hour here. This is all online as well. You can find this
yeah,
by searching on ChatGPT, especially. That's the quickest way to find it. And I think, yeah, 7 to 9, you can train at like just below max effort, but not quite at max effort. And then if you're
yeah, yeah, yeah.
sleeping, I think he said if you slept less than 6 or closer to 5 hours, then you'd have to potentially change the training. So yeah, it's an interesting interesting strategy for sure.
Again, though, a strategy I don't think most people would be able to do, but it's quite clear that because I've heard Victor talk about his coach. What's his coach's name again? I'm sorry.
Mads.
Yeah, Mads. I've heard him talk about him, and the way he talked about him in the past was with great reverence, but also that like, his coach told him like, hey, this is going to be all in, all or nothing. So you have to like be really all in. So you can tell he's quite intense. And yeah, look, if you can do that and someone's pushing you and forcing you to have 8, 9 hours of kip a night, then of course it's a no-brainer. You're
Yeah.
going to run so much better. But just, yeah, for most people, it's just not doable. But like obviously he's all in with his coach and everything. So yeah, hopefully he gets it in. And he seems like one of those lads, like I said, very meticulous, and I'm sure he'll be nailing a whole lot of green lights as much as possible. And yeah, I wish I could. I wish I could. That'd be amazing. 9 hours plus sleep a night every night. That would be unreal.
I can't remember the last time I got 9 hours sleep.
No.
Anyway, last question about Victor. I asked him the challenging question on air, broadcasting to the internet, what he thinks he can run for the marathon in the future. And having run just one and not doing a proper build up and having to drop out, it's very difficult to know at this point in time. But we do know his 10K, his half marathon. But he did mention that he thinks that potentially he could run 210 or maybe just under 210. What do you think about that? Quite a difficult one to probably debate because we have not enough data to go on specific to the marathon. But I think he drew parallels to Hendrik Pfeiffer, who has run a little bit quicker than him in the 10K. And Hendrik's run 207 low, I think 207.16 or around there. And I think he sort
Yeah.
of mentioned that he's quite a similar in physiology to Hendrik in his values, lactates, etc. So yeah, it'd be interesting to see. But what do you think about that?
He's similar to Henrik in the way that they train and the results they produce in terms of their lactate readings. Is that what you're saying?
I think he's just very like Victor seems to be very efficient at that sort of LT1, that that
Yeah.
that threshold zone,
Similar to
and
Henrik.
yeah, yeah, and similar to quite a few, a lot of marathoners are like that. I think Phil Sessman's similar. He's, when I know we bring up the V dot calculator a lot, but when you throw in these times, their marathon is much, much stronger than their 10K. And I think there's indicators in some of Victor's testing to show that he's going to be quite suited to the distance, to the marathon. Yeah.
Yeah. What age is Henrik Pfeiffer?
Question. I think he's similar to born in 93. So yeah, he must be 30, 33, 34 now.
Two.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so he's early 30s. When did Henrik start like running? Seriously?
Hendrick was pretty good through high school, and then he went through a period where he didn't run so well for a while. He ran 213 pretty young, I think when he was about 23. And then he had a few years of injuries. Then he came back to the marathon and yeah, worked his way down from 212 down to 210, 209, 208, and now 207. So yeah, I think
Yeah.
Victor's got a possibility of getting down there, to be honest. It's very difficult to tell. Victor's also 39, but at the same time, he started running seriously when he's 33. So, the question often comes up like, at what age do you peak in running and what age is it difficult to improve? And that depends a lot on
Yeah.
a few things because, if you're someone that's been running for a very long time, I guess I'm a good example of that, been sort of thrashing myself since I was 17 or so, done a lot of volume and there's plenty of, athletes out there that are in their late 30s, early 40s that have been running for a very long time. There's pros and cons to that. You've got that volume in your legs, so you can sort of return back to training and get back into a decent level of fitness very quickly. But at the same time, you're aging as well. Like you're going to get to a point where your peak hits you when you're unable to improve. But Victor is running very fast, 28:57 after only 5 years of running, and he started when he was 33. So I think Victor has the possibility potentially of peaking into his, I would guess into his mid 40s if the motivation stays there to do it, which it sounds like at the moment that's all there. And then also, of course, avoiding injuries, because as everyone knows, I think the biggest challenge to remain consistent and to improve is to avoid injuries. So that'll be another thing that he really needs to get right, which is partly luck, but a huge part of that's just smart training and doing all the right things. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think like you get where I'm going, asking those questions about Henrik, right? Henrik's been running marathons at an elite level for over 10 years, right? You've been running marathons for a long time, but even before that, you were running and ripping 800s at an elite level, right? Victor, as much as I love him, and this is not a knock on him, has not been doing that. And that's a real thing, especially in the marathon, And if you look at his, because I listen very carefully to his Runners FM pod about his marathon, the Auckland Marathon, right? That he ran not long ago. And he dropped out at 22 miles, 23. What was it?
Around 35K, around 22 miles. Yeah.
Okay. And I know it's a tricky course. Like I'm not getting, I know it's a tricky course and it was quite humid that day, I believe too, right? So he has those things and it's not stacked. He was like, running like 220 and possible sub 220 type paces and kind of on his own for a lot of it and doing things like surges and all. But there's a lot to be said there. Like, he was talking about how, and you can tell he's an honest lad, he wasn't bullshitting, how he felt like really comfortable and then he put in some surges and still felt comfortable. But then, boom, he gets cramping, right? The most clear indicator that, he has that kind of underdeveloped aerobic base and underdeveloped, that underdeveloped like mitochondria and like ligament kind of callus, if you will, that you have, that guys like Henrik have, that, from stacking and building marathon block after block after block. And it's, and can he get that and build that up? Absolutely. Like, yeah, he's obviously an unbelievable runner. His 10K PB is what, 28:40 something? Is that right?
Just under 29, 28:57, I think.
50. So, okay, pardon me. Yeah. Like on the road too. He did it on the road as well.
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah. Like that's unbelievable. Of course, major talent. But that's a big indication that you're running, 220 pace, sub 220 pace, and everything feels good until it doesn't, right? Big indicator that you haven't built up that. And if we were talking about a 20-something-year-old, then I would say, man, give him a few blocks, give him a few years, and he'll easily turn that 28-minute 10K into something crazy fast in the marathon. But age is a real limiter too, with that in mind for the marathon. Like it really is, it really is. Can he run a really fast marathon with sometimes? Absolutely. Can he get down to that, really elite kind of 210 range? That would be, I wouldn't say absolutely to that. That would be very difficult to say absolutely to, for all those reasons, the lack of the lifetime mileage, and getting into running later. And then even when he got into running, like he's been so focused on those shorter distances, that it's quite different, you know. If he got into running he got into it when was he, what, 33 or something, 32, 33, and he's 39 now, if I'm right.
Right.
You know, if he got in there and he was, you know, doing it all and building up into marathons then yeah, definitely. But the fact that he's been hammering, because that's a very, very, very different stimulus. You know, the training that he does to hammer those really fast 10Ks and 5Ks. Um, and so, yeah, it'd be tough. It'd be really tough to see, for all those reasons, to see him be able to bridge that gap to around a 210, you know? I hope he does. Obviously, I really like him. I really like following his stuff. Really interesting. And it's amazing. The most amazing thing is that he's not a runner, in the sense that, you know, he got into it in his you know, early to mid 30s. Like, that's the coolest part about it, I think. And just turn it around, and you know, most people that do that, they're just like, they do it recreationally, just for the crack, you know, for a midlife crisis or whatever. Whereas he's like, he turned it on and just starts ripping like elite level stuff. So obviously I'd love to see it, but just like, you know, for all those reasons, of course, it'd be hard, you know, it'd be hard, because the marathon's a different beast. Like, as we all know, it's a different beast. Like, the body, it's like, you can't lie. There's so many other distances where, you know, you can grit through with talent and things like that. Like, the marathon is just not like that, because you need talent, and you need years, and you need experience, and you need this, and you need that. And even if you have all of those things, the chances of it still going right on race day is still low, you know? Um, and so, yeah, I don't know. It'd be tough. It'd be tough. Hope he does, but it'd be tough.
Looking forward to following his journey into the future, when more marathons seem to be on the agenda. But Luke, we get a lot of questions through Instagram. I get quite a few through email as well, and they tend to be very similar. And of course, probably every month or so, we try to do a questions and answer, and we are going to do that one today. But I thought, instead of answering the questions that come through email, because they tend to be very similar all the time, and I didn't want to sort of repeat the questions, I thought this week I would just try and get a few different questions happening for us. So I just asked ChatGPT about five, because I actually put into ChatGPT a whole lot of the questions that we are asked, and I said, ask some different questions to these. What can we answer? So these questions are courtesy of ChatGPT, and I think they're pretty good. They're a little bit more philosophical, a little bit more sort of not, yeah, a bit different to the ones we typically get. But I'm going to ask you, and I'll answer the same questions. So, what's one training belief that you used to have that you've completely changed your mind about?
Oh yeah, that's a good one. You're asking me first to answer
Yeah.
first, and then you go. Okay. One training belief I used to have that I've completely changed my mind about. Yeah, man, that one was easy, because at the beginning I used to always think, if I wasn't like, in my hard sessions, if I wasn't like hands and knees in it, you know, just like bursting every rep, where I'm like hands on knees, pumping sweat, almost throwing up, then like I didn't work hard enough, and so it doesn't count. And of course, that's just so stupid. But man, my first marathon was Mountains to Beach, then Dublin Marathon. I want to say, at least for those two, and maybe even Houston, like maybe my first three marathons, I still had that mindset where I have to absolutely bury every single, like, that was when I used to do every long run. Every long run was like, I would have to get some kind of a PB in my long run, like a Strava PB. Had to. I did that for months, where like I had to get like either a 10-mile PB or half marathon PB or a 20-mile or whatever it was. Had to see like a Strava thing come up where it says PB. And then the next week, do it again. And this was week to week. This is like a 7 day, like, and it's so stupid. But of course, you know, you change that mindset that you have to respect controlled efforts, consistency, and recovery, like, way, not just as much as intensity, but even more than intensity, and figure out when to put certain. And I'm still not perfect. I'm still not great at it. Like, if any of my mates that run with me listen to this podcast, they'll probably be like sniggering, like, that I'm talking about this, because I'm still not great at it. But my mindset's changed. In terms of putting it into practice, it's still hard. But yeah, I really do have changed that mindset and really do try my best to, separate the really hard efforts to the controlled efforts to the easier efforts and, figure out where on the plan they need to go.
Yeah, it's a very common one amongst runners, especially runners that are just getting started, right? They just think that they're not going to get that much out of it unless they go near 100%. Yep, very common. I've got two. So I'm not quite sure why I thought this very early on, but especially in the 800-meter days, I thought that there was a gray zone, right? I thought that if you're not running either easy or you're not running, I thought that there was sort of a zone where you just really didn't get much out of it. It was sort of somewhere
Yeah,
between, you know, threshold and, some sort of easy running pace. And I thought that, there's just nothing to gain there. It's sort of junk, not junk. It's just miles that will only really fatigue your legs and they won't really do anything for you aerobically or in any sort of capacity. And I think that that's incorrect. I absolutely think that I don't think that there's necessarily specific paces that you need to run there. I just think oftentimes it is useful to run at that sort of steady state pace, especially for the marathon long runs and especially early on in the block as well, just before you're getting to the marathon specific long runs where you're doing a lot of stuff at marathon pace. I think transitioning from doing long runs that are a little bit easier, say on hills, to progressing through and having some stuff in between that easy running pace and marathon pace, I think is really useful. And the second one is something that people that listen to me plenty would know. I really discovered this last year, and it's that pure speed can be very helpful for the marathon. It can be really helpful for any distance. And I think it's easy to look at the energy systems of the marathon and say, okay, it's almost 100% aerobic. It's 99 point something percent aerobic, and it's not really anaerobic at all. So what's the point in doing these anaerobic hill sprints or these anaerobic sprints in general? But I think what really helped me was thinking about it from the standpoint of mechanics rather than energy systems and thinking through like, okay, mechanically, I'm able to just simply sprint a little bit faster now while I'm training this system. So essentially every single pace and every single effort slower than that should feel a little bit easier once you get better at that. So I think Steve Magnus coins it the speed gap, right? You get a little bit faster over 50 meters to 100 meters, maybe 1% or half a percent. And then all of a sudden, those paces that you were trying to, not all of a sudden, that's wrong, but over time, those paces that you were trying to hit at marathon effort or threshold should become a little bit easier because your top end speed improves. But balancing doing that sprint work with the longer marathon work is difficult. You really have to make sure you go into those speed sessions a little bit fresh because it's quite easy to hurt yourself. Although I will say that doing sprints on hills is definitely safer. It's a little bit easier on the hamstrings and the calves. So yeah, that's something that I've definitely changed my mind about. If someone said to me even 4 years ago, before I really studied Canova's philosophy, that hill sprints or very fast 10-second, 15-second, 100-meter sprints would be useful in the marathon, I would be like, I don't really see how it would be, but I've really changed my opinion on that because I've implemented that into a lot of athletes that I coach into their training programs now, and a lot of them have found it very beneficial as well. Yeah. Second
well,
question that we have here is, can you describe a race or training moment that genuinely shaped who you are as a runner?
yeah. I've got a couple. One of them I've talked about kind of ad nauseum in the past, so I'll like make it brief. But it's the one in the Dublin Marathon. Remember where that runner came up to me, kind of the battle-torn older marathon runner. He had all the kinesio tape all over his legs, and he came up to me and was like, he literally talking to me while he was dropping me about peaks and valleys, and how like the
That's right.
whole the whole marathon is just about peaks and valleys, and you're in a valley now, there's a peak down the road, and then he just boom, just dropped me. And like that, like I've said it so many times because it really does. It's stuck with me. So, and it really does help me. It really does help me in races all the time. Every like any distance as well. You really there's so many moments where you can find yourself in what you perceive to be quite a deep hole, and it's actually not. If you really just kind of figure it out and find a way to stay patient and stuff. Because I really do believe like you don't find your limits when things are going perfectly. You really find your limits more so when things go wrong, but you keep going anyway. That's like you really do. And that really did shift my mindset in races more so, but in training too, for sure. You can use that mindset in training. Kind of shifting your mindset from you know, proving what I can do to like learning how to more so how to execute under pressure. There's a bit of pressure on you, things aren't going well, you don't freak out, you don't catastrophize, and you just, you know, more often than not, there's a way out. Of course, there's exceptions, if you're actually dealing with a bit of an injury or something like that, that's way different. I'm not talking about a situation like that. Just talking about a situation where you don't feel great, but there's something still in there and you can kind of switch your mindset back to, and this is what we talked about in the past about talking about mental toughness and things like that. Like you can practice that. You can find yourself in a bit of a hole during reps, mile reps or whatever tempo session in training, and the more you practice pushing through that, as opposed to saying like, oh, no, I'm pulling the plug. I'm cutting, pulling the cord on this rep. Like sometimes you need to do it, but sometimes you don't. Sometimes you need to grit through it, and you need to say, no, I'm going to find a way to try and salvage this and find the pace again and get some momentum on this turn or something. The more you do that, the more you can find your way out of that valley and find the peak down the road. So that one is definitely one. And then the other one would be a race again. It would be the Houston Marathon 2024. Yeah. When I really should have done the half. It was when I came back from a bit of heat illness again. Shocker. And I was getting ready. I was going to do the half kind of like this because I was like, oh, I'm starting to feel good, starting to string together some training, but I'm definitely not ready for a marathon. And I gave into like peer pressure, like loads of my friends were doing the marathon and not the half. And I was like, oh no, I'll do the marathon, I'll be fine. And I still went for sub 225. And I went through halfway, right on pace. And then like mile 15, just boom. It all just fell apart. And that really did kind of change my mindset again, because it was like, when you're ready for a race and when you're not, and it's kind of like the two different mindsets, the two polar opposite sides from what I was just talking about, where you can find grit and determination versus this mindset when you need to be smart and listen to your body. And I wasn't smart. And I was like, nah, I can do it. I can be ready for this race. And you can't do that in a marathon. You just can't. If you're not ready, it's okay to say to yourself, all right, we'll put that one on the back burner and we'll continue to amass fitness in training so we can cash in on that fitness at a later date when we are ready. But now's not the time. And, I've done that a few times, but that Houston one really was more of an eye opener that like, man, you shouldn't really be pushing for races just because, when you're not ready.
Mm-hmm. Do you think though, if you're not ready for a race, do you think it's not a problem to do the race, but just cut back on the goal that you've set for yourself, right? Like that's a
Could have done that. 100%. Yep.
because this is something that comes up as a coach.
Yeah.
This comes up, I wouldn't say regularly, but it comes up from time to time. I'm coaching an athlete at the moment that is doing CIM this weekend. He had a perfect build through until a week and a half ago when he got sick, caught it from his daughter, and he had to have 9 days off, right? And now he's panicking about, oh, I don't think I'm going to be able to hit goal pace. I don't think I'm about to hit the goal pace. And I sort of said, look, you might be able to hit the goal pace. We'll do a workout. We've already completed the workout now. It was yesterday as a tune-up, but we can always adjust the goal to being a little bit slower this time and be ready for the next time. So I think it's often, it's interesting how people often don't even consider that they it is an option to just pull back on the goal this time and understand that there was a little bit of bad luck in this particular case, and you can shoot for that goal the next time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, 100%. Like in that race specifically, I got dragged into because I was in the elite section, because I got like this local league thing. So I got dragged up and all that. You know, it was real special. It was really cool being experienced and all that. And there was a bunch of women that were running the Olympic standard. What is that? You know, sub 226 or whatever it was. And loads of them were like, no, we're gonna run 225. Like loads of them. And I was like, man, this is perfect. Like that's what I'm gonna do. Versus like there was a whole bunch of women that were trying to go for the OTQ, you know, 237. I should have been like, oh man, that'd be lovely for a training run. Run with these women and help a bunch of women get an OTQ, you know, 237 as opposed to 225. You know, yeah, that would have been way smarter. But then there's always a part of me though where this is just me, you know. I think you're coaching, you know, you're a better coach than I am for sure. So I wouldn't say anything about that. But just more for me, um, there's something about running a marathon at a slower pace. It's like, yeah, I could do it, but the marathons, I don't know. I know you're about to smile, but I'm not about to say what you think I'm gonna say. I'm more gonna say like it's still so hard on your body, the distance, that even slowing down while I could do it and it wouldn't beat up my body so much, it would still beat me up pretty damn bad. You know what I mean? To where I would, for me, I would probably just prefer it to go down in the distance. Just rip a half if they have it on the same day. Um, versus running a slower marathon. Because even though it's slower and I could handle it better and stuff, like the distance is just no joke though. You know what I mean? So if I'm not
Oh, yeah.
ready, you know what I'm trying to say?
I know exactly what you're
So
saying. Yeah.
yeah.
All right, I got a couple. It's funny, like I've been running for 18 years and I had a little bit of a hard time thinking about a good answer for this one, which is terrible. But the first one that did come to mind was back in the 800-meter days. So I spent 8 years focused on the 800 between 2004 and 2012, roughly. Actually, a little bit longer than that, 2013, I think I finished up. And there was one particular year in the year of the Olympics in 2008 that I was very clearly overtraining. And at the time, I didn't know, right? I tried doing much higher volume than normal, a lot harder training, and I was racing pretty poorly. And before the season started, my best time was 149 .2, I believe, and I couldn't break 150 all year. I was running 150, 151, 150, 151, 150, and I was often placing in the middle of the field to the back of the field. And Nationals was approaching, it was coming up, and I was racing poorly, and I wasn't super sure if I'd even run Nationals. And I thought to myself, man, what's happened? Like I've done so much more training than normal this year. Like, why have I not improved? Why have I gone backwards? And the week before Nationals, I got sick. Had a very bad cold. I was forced to take, I think it was 5 or 6 days off. I think I got sick from the end of the week before. And I decided not to run Nationals. But my coach at the time um, basically convinced me with a couple of days before the Nationals were about to start. He said, look, it's just up the road in Brisbane. It's 45 minutes away. I'd love you to just go and start and see how you go in the heat. And ultimately, I ended up running a personal best. Not a personal best, very close to a personal best in the heat. And I ran a huge personal best in the final. And I think that was a really sort of big lesson for me to understand that one, taking a whole lot of time off, especially after you've very clearly overtrained, is often the right thing to do, right? Because I bounced back from that and ran very, very well. And two, I think you really have to try to have the awareness and understand when you are overtraining and to do something about it earlier. And what I would have done earlier in that case is I would have, sat back and gone, like, I'm doing more training. I'm not getting better. Like there's obviously something wrong here. And I would have adjusted what I was doing, but it took me too long to figure that out. And it took a sickness for me to actually figure that out. So I think that's one of the biggest ones. And in the marathon, I don't have a particular moment that comes to mind, but in 2021, I improved from 224 down to 220. And I was struggling with an Achilles injury for about a year and a half before that, where I kept trying to do higher volume and I just my Achilles just kept getting worse and worse and worse, and I just couldn't do it. And so I thought to myself, I'm just going to do a low volume build up, and I probably won't PB, I probably won't run overly well, but I'll just do a low volume build up because everything I'd ever heard about in the marathon was all about volume. You can't run that well unless you do a huge amount of volume. And I ended up doing about 105 kilometers a week for the 12 weeks leading in. and ended up running a huge PB and ran 220 for the first time. And I think that was a pretty big eye opener to me to realize you don't necessarily have to do huge volume in order to run well in the marathon, especially if you're someone that has a lot of volume in your legs over many, many years. So I think those two things come to mind first. Just, I guess, things that are sort of maybe different to what you would hear in terms of just conventional advice. So yeah, they're the two things that came to mind for me. All right, question 3. What do most runners get wrong about training, and what should they do? What should they be doing instead? What do you think is a common mistake that you see runners making in training, and what do you think that they should be doing instead? Anything come to mind?
Yeah, loads. It's hard to, I think, you know, it's so easy to say like, oh, so many people train too easy, or sorry, too hard on their easy days and too easy on their hard days, right? Of course. But I think it's more nuanced than that these days, especially. I think so much, I've seen it in the last year, especially. There's been so much of a focus on easiness and heart rate and all this, that people are just training too easy for everything. Like they're going too easy on their easy days and too easy on their hard days, where it's just nothing but easy because they're just trying so hard to focus on, this zone, how zone 2 became so sexy, all of a sudden, and then, you know, then it comes time to rip hard days and they're just so focused on heart rates and this and that. And it's uh it's just so easy to get into that kind of mindset and, pricking your finger, and it's like, oh, I got to stay within this millimole for my lactate, and if it gets a bit over, and it's like, yeah, just listen to your body, just listen to your body. There's so much like to be gained from listening to your body and just going to effort. Me and you talk about it ad nauseum, and we should, because it's so important, and not enough people do it. Even like a lot of elite runners, and like there's a lot of elite runners you don't see that are just so focused on, these numbers, and you can even see it that they're not progressing like as well, um, versus the elite runners that just listen to their body. We don't really care so much about heart rate and zones and this and that. And it's like that's where you see the real, and again, you mentioned it earlier, and I actually did have this in my mind, like the gray zone, especially if you're doing a marathon. There's so much to be gained by living in that gray zone from time to time. Like there really is. Like I really do. If I was a coach, I would have my runners running, you know, a lot of runs, just easy run, listen to your body, go easy. Who gives a shit about pace? Just it should be easy, should be conversational, whatever. And then on a Tuesday, split it up. This week we're gonna rip. Like you're gonna absolutely rip. And then easy runs. And then on the weekend, this should be marathon effort, again, more effort, blah, blah. And then the next week, uh, big, meaty, medium, long run where you're in that gray zone, just in the gray zone, kind of grinding where it feels good. You're not mad, but it's not quite easy either. Hills, and just like mixing it up with all that. Like there's just not enough of that. There's just so much that I keep seeing that's just real cookie cutter, just like easy, easy, easy. LT1, this millimole, easy, easy, has to be at this certain pace, and it's just like just not enough runners. And I think to answer the question, what they're getting wrong is just they're not listening to their body and mixing it up. Like your body should feel refreshed and easy on this run, and then your body should feel, comfortably hard, ripping it really hard. Then the next run should be kind of easy, not so easy. And it should be more like that as opposed to just kind of mixing that around. And it's just so much easier if you just go by that. You just go by RPE. So much easier.
Did you read Christian Eriksen's post that I sent you through? Because it sounds like you're,
No, I didn't get a chance to. Why is it? Is
well,
it pretty
you
much
bet
what I just said?
pretty much exactly what you just said. Yeah.
Ah,
So Christian Ulrichsen, Norwegian marathon legend. He is a 221 marathoner. Plenty of people listening would know who he is. Hopefully he's listening. On November 30, he wrote a great post essentially saying that he doesn't feel like he's improved in the marathon since 2019, despite him learning so much about it, really getting into the weeds around testing, lactate, heart rate, all these different things. And he just really reflected on his performances recently and sort of concluded that he wants to go away from all that now. And he wants to go back to running to feel and more of a wild approach to training as opposed to very rigid, sort of like what you're saying. Yeah, I thought you were saying this because I sent you through that post last night and I thought you read that and I thought you were sort of referring to that to some extent because it's exactly,
no,
yeah.
no, I didn't get a chance to read it. No, no. But
That
I mean,
post,
it
by the
makes sense.
way, just quickly, sorry, that post is on November 30. It's called Last Sunday in the Mountains. Christian Ulrichsen, if you want to go and check out that post. It's quite long. I was actually thinking about reading it on this podcast, but it's quite a lengthy read. So I'd recommend going to check that out.
Yeah, I'll have to read it now because I know you sent it on to me. But it's just like, yeah, to not beat a dead horse. It's like, it's funny that you're saying that he used the word wild. I think he said a wild approach. Like,
I don't
and
know
I
if he
find that
used that word. I sort of summarized what he said. Yeah.
budget. But yeah, I know some people would have that mindset, but it's not. Like if you're truly listening to your body, like that's the way it should be. And look, I'm not perfect at it either. Like there's some sessions where I show up beat up and I should be listening to my body and be like, okay, this rep needs to be a bit slower, should be a bit easier because I'm so beat up and then I feel super fresh and I'm just kind of going with guys. I'm like, no, I kind of want to rip it here, like because I feel good and that's what you should do. Like you do more of that than because your body doesn't know what the fucking lactate reader says. It doesn't
Mhm.
know what your watch's heart rate monitor says. It doesn't know what the smile split on your watch says. It just knows effort. And the more you dial into that and the more you're in tune with that, like the better you're going to be. Because at the end of the day, on race day, that's the only reason we're doing it. We're doing it for these races, these fun races where we run as fast as we possibly can and get PBs and all this good stuff. When you're in the darkness in the last 10K of a marathon, all you know is effort. That's all you know. For the first half and the first 25K or whatever, yeah, you can dial into your splits and whatever, and you should. But that last 10K, man, all you know is effort. You are grinding for your life and you're just like, certainly the last 5K, you're not really caring what the splits are. You're just like, right, effort, gotta just grind this out, whatever. And the more you're in tune with that, the more well equipped you're gonna be for that hard last 10K.
Similar answer on my side. I think a lot of athletes try and hit, or they want very specific paces to hit in training. And I think while that can be beneficial to some extent to have a goal to work towards and to have a target to reach, I think a lot of the time that I've spoken about this plenty of times, a lot of the time that then results in you feeling like the workout is a win or a loss. And if you consistently are not hitting these particular paces, great example yesterday, athlete that I coach in New Zealand, Tom, I know he listens to the podcast. He did a long run where it was extremely windy in New Zealand, like gale force winds. And even though he didn't necessarily pick a specific pace to run to, he realized on his way back that he was doing a half marathon effort block. And I guess because his pace was slowing so much, he decided into the headwind, he decided to pull the pin on the workout. And he messaged me after the workout after I texted him and asked him, is everything okay? He said in retrospect, he wished that he just let go of pace and just run to the effort, right? And I think that's a big thing in training. A lot of people will want a pace to hit in their workout, and then they'll decide afterwards whether it's sort of a win or a loss. And it reminds me of another guy, Coach Mike. He is based in California, and he had a 400-meter session recently, 2400s, where he wanted a goal pace to hit. And I sort of said, I'll give you a pace, but don't be stuck to it. He didn't quite hit the pace, but it was still a very, very strong average that he ran over the 2400s. And he called the workout on his Strava a doozy. And I sort of said, that was not a doozy. That was still you're in the middle of marathon training. You've got 4.5 weeks till CIM. and so I think it's easy to go down the wrong track mentally when you've got goal paces to hit all the time. Okay, what's the best piece of coaching advice anyone has ever given you?
The best piece of coaching advice that anyone's given me. Oh yeah.
Or advice in
Uh
general.
yeah. It's kind of like an amalgamation, because the question is any person, because it's like I feel like I've received this advice from many people, um, you included, but it's kind of like two parts. But the main one would be like that fitness doesn't disappear, right? And I know like that advice really has stuck with me, especially when I've been going through like times that I just had, coming back from heat exhaustion and stuff like that. You get so worried that, all the hard work that you've done and all the fitness you've amassed, like you really do have those moments where you're like, man, that's it. It's disappeared. Like I'm going to get back to running and I'm going to be just a fat, out of shape piece of shit that just doesn't know how to run anymore. And it's like, and it's just so untrue. And and the more you realize that, then it becomes about a mindset thing when you're coming back from an injury. When you can accept that as a reality, that your fitness doesn't disappear and you can be, proud and secure in yourself with that, it really does help your mindset on your road back, your road to recovery. And when you have that mindset, your road back is so much smoother, because then you're not, because in the past, I've been bad at it, of course. And in the past, when I haven't really had that mindset, then you're coming back and then you're pushing and you're pushing, and you're like pushing too hard. And, and, uh, and that's a losing game. You start doing that, you're asking for another injury. And so the more you can kind of be secure in yourself that like this fitness doesn't disappear, the better you are for sure. And the fitness will come back so much quicker than you think. So much quicker. It just always does. It always does.
It always does.
Um, and and the other part of that would be kind of the same thing, but different. It's not coming back from like injury, but it's more like specifically to marathons. Like each marathon, you should view it as building blocks, you know, where in the past I would do a marathon and I would think, okay, marathon's done. I take a week, 10 days off or whatever, and then get ready to build again. I would always have the mindset like, oh, that's it. I'm starting back at square one, starting at zero, where it's not. Each one is a new building block. And like, again, you've told me this, a few other lads have told me this, where it's like the whole training block and then especially the stimulus that your body gets from ripping that hard marathon, it's unbelievable. And then when you take that week and a half, 2 weeks off, when your body's recovering and absorbing all that, like you're a new, much more improved runner when you come back and start your next block on top of that and on top of it and on top of it. And again, it's about having that kind of security in your mind that it's like, okay, I've amassed a serious amount of fitness there. This next block is going to be so much easier. And don't push it. Don't push it. It'll come. Don't force it. And yeah, I think that those have been the best pieces of advice that I think I've got.
Mm. Good one. Yeah, so much good advice I've received over the years, and I've probably shared most of these on the podcast already. But one I probably haven't spoken tons about is just fueling in general and how much of an impact it can have on your race and on training. But at the same time, I think that this is a little bit individual as well. But personally, for me, when I really understood the way that the system, how carbohydrates are utilized, much more at the closer to zone 3 marathon effort and above and the thresholds and so forth, and just really understanding the quantities that I needed in order to feel better in training and to perform better in training, and really testing the limits with those too, and training the stomach, making sure I'm not jumping straight into doing 100 grams of carbs an hour from taking some time off, for example. I think really understanding how that all worked has been such a big game changer for me, and also in the recovery aspect as well. So I think in general, fueling, and that can also include protein, nutrition in general. I think that's once you can really understand timing of carbohydrates, timing of protein, and put creatine in there as well. for recovery. I think that's been a big deal for me when it comes to learning about just performance in general in the marathon. Yeah. Last one before we wrap up and switch over to the private podcast feed. If you could give one piece of advice to your younger running self, what would it be and why?
Hmm. I think I think it would just be kind of like a collection of all the advice, like in a concise way, where it's like my younger running self, so specific to running. Yeah, I think it would be, don't rush the process, you know?
Yeah.
And in the same vein, don't rush it and don't force it, you know? Too often I forced it. When I just talked about that kind of, so many times I've forced it. And I'm still not great at it. I'm still not perfect at it. I know that's one of my biggest weaknesses where I just force things, but I'm getting better at it for sure. I'm getting better at it. And I wish when I started it, I was even better at it in the past before. But then it's hard to say, right? Because especially when you're just starting running, like you gain fitness so fast because you're starting at absolutely nothing, like the fitness you gain, like where you're just like, I ran like my first real serious half marathon was like a 117, and I was like, whoa, that's crazy. And then I ran like a 112, and I'm like, what the fuck? Like, these massive jumps. And so it's hard to say that, but because of course it's going to work when you push it as well to a degree, because fitness is going to come so fast because you're not anywhere near your peak limits then. But then, yeah, I guess it's more so to myself when I was getting at or near my actual limits. Then it's like, okay, you need to realize you're kind of pushing your peak now, and you can push it, but don't force it. Of course you can get faster, but it's going to get a lot harder than in the past. So now, don't force it. Take it easy. Don't freak out that every race isn't a PB anymore. Those days are gone, because at the beginning, once I got to that stage where like not every race was a PB, then yeah, you freak out a bit, You're like, what the hell? How did I not PB again for the sixth marathon in a row? What's happening? And it's like, and you don't realize. And so, yeah, I wish I was able to kind of have that mindset where it's like, stay steady, stay disciplined, it'll come, don't force things. And yeah.
Yeah. Mine would be race more frequently, especially over 5K and 10K, something that I've not done well at all. I have just decided not to do that. But I think if I could go back and start again, especially in the marathon journey, back, 2017, I would race much more frequently over 5 and 10K just to get that racing experience and to have short-term goals to really work towards. Because I think for a while there, I went so deep into the marathon that I lost track of how important 5K fitness and speed is for the marathon, at least for me personally. I think that's the case for many people. And I think if I could go back in time, I would say I would do that. I would race over 5K and 10K more frequently, just to one, get better at racing, as I said, but also just to have those short-term goals to go after and to really, see if you can improve over those distances. Because I think if you improve over those distances, it just psychologically gives you a lot of confidence to improve over the longer distances. I think if I'd done that and picked 5K targets and goals earlier on, I think, I think it probably would have made a big difference to the trajectory of the marathon performance. Yeah. Cool. That's almost the hour for us on the public podcast. Thanks everyone for listening in. And we're going to transition over to the private podcast feed where Luke is 7 weeks out from Houston half marathon and 12 weeks out from Osaka marathon. You have been back for a couple of weeks now after taking a little bit of time off. So we'll hear all about Luke's return to running. I'm still sidelined, but doing a little bit of cross training. So we'll share a little bit about that. So hopefully you can join us over there. You can find a link in the description of this podcast or YouTube episode to join us. And huge thank you to the people that already do. But we'll be back next week with another episode of Training Talk. Thanks again for listening in.